These are expensive for a reason. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I have not had one of these in a long time, and it just kind of fell into my lap one day. So we are going to document a original Gibson Flying V from the late 70s, early 80s era. If you've ever looked at the asking prices of these things on Reverb and ever asked yourself, why are they so expensive? It's more than a Les Paul Custom, seems to be relatively basic as far as construction, just straight up mahogany bodies and necks. There's no like really fancy abalone purfling to them or anything like that. They're not as historically specced out as like the Carina ones. Why do people pay such crazy money? It's because these things are magic. They just play and feel awesome. They weigh almost nothing. They've got these nice chunky neck profiles, but not too big, and they sustain like crazy. And that's not just me hyping these things up. That's just the truth, and it's been known way before even I got into guitars. So let's do a little bit of Flying V history. The model was first introduced in the late 50s. It was made of Carina, string through tailpiece, really cool and crazy. However, it was too far ahead of its time, but not quite as far as the Explorer, who didn't get reissued until 1976. The Flying V comes back for its first main production year in 1967. But other than turning into mahogany, so much more changed about these things. From being either a stop bar tailpiece or one of those little vibrola units, the way the guitar itself was constructed, the control layout. Basically, you can get a 50s style Flying V and you can get a 60s style Flying V. Now, when you get into the 70s, if you have the budget for an original 60s, yeah, I'm sure those things are fantastic. I've never quite yet had the privilege of trying one, but I love these 70s monsters. They just feel so awesome to play. There's a lot of guys that go, how are you supposed to play a Flying V sitting down? Like this. It's perfect, feels great, perfect couch guitar. But it's also awesome on stage. But in the E2 CMT episode, I talked about guitars that have fretboards and necks that just stick up way above the body. For whatever reason, I love that about the Flying V, but I hate that about the Explorers. I wonder if it comes down to the mahogany wood versus the maple. That is a defining feature of the 70s style Flying V, and it was one of the reasons why I was so excited Gibson finally reissued those. Now, in my opinion, they didn't quite capture the exact magic of the originals, but hey, at least you get the stylings, because that's something else you'll notice here. I really love the natural ones because they have a natural headstock. So technically, it's a matching headstock, and there's tons of other custom colors, but for me, natural has always been where it's at. And you can find painted headstock caps as well. In fact, the late 70s have actually been reissued with the recent Kirk Hammett signatures. But they have these interesting rounded over headstocks, and the shape changes throughout the 70s, but this is a very nice 1980 example. We still get the volute, but you saw this right. It's a mahogany neck. This is one of the few models that was spared the Norlin era maple neck that everything got transitioned to. Now, that's not to say in the late 70s they didn't introduce the V2, which did have a maple walnut combination, and you can find a primarily maple one, but they looked at that more so as an evolution of the Flying V rather than just straight up replacing this particular model. However, you get into the 80s, they start to do the Carina ones again. They still made these, just not quite as many. So scarcity is the reason why these have gone up, as well as people figuring out that they're fantastic players. Now, I said this one kind of fell into my lap. Let's dive into that story. So about a year ago, a viewer commissioned a private help session about Flying Vs. He was looking for the right one. He wanted to know what was the difference between the 70s and the early 80s versions. So I kind of helped him, guide him on that, and we found an example that was about right, and we found out how much he should be paying for it. But he was also torn between that and a Kirk Hammett signature. Now, he ended up buying both, but then I got a message from him saying he needed to drum up some cash for something else. And after playing both of them, he liked everything about the 70s version better except for the lower frets, because that's just how the styling of them was. And the Kirk Hammett reissue is just a little bit taller. To which I tried to convince him to keep the vintage one, because not only will it continue to go up in value most likely, all you have to do is refret it and you'd be perfectly good to go. Because that's the magic behind these. You don't have any fret nibs or binding. You can get away with refretting one of these at a professional shop that won't completely destroy the side lacquer, and it'll still look look good. A refret on a Flying V isn't as big of a deal. It's when you lose the fret nibs that occasionally you get some buyers that are like, yeah, I think I'll pass on that one now. But at the end of the day, he needed the money sooner than later. I wasn't really in the market for a Flying V right now, but hey, it dropped in my lap, might as well take it, because it's been a long time. So let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench, take an individual look at its parts and specs to learn more about this, and then we will get to a tone sample. For 44 years old, after a deep clean, this thing is not in bad shape at all. Usually these Vs get all beat up, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So here's what the routes look like on these. When you view them underneath the pickguard, they're a little bit larger than you're used to seeing on like a Les Paul. That's because it's a top routed guitar. They can make it a little bit larger if they wanted to. But we can see a C marking as well as a January 18th of 1980 date stamp. But other than that, no funny business as far as the routes go. But now let's take a look at our pickups. So when I was first helping evaluate this guitar for him when he bought it, it was a consignment at a well-known shop from an owner who had this since the early 80s, so maybe second owner or something. They bought it used, and he said something about maybe the bridge pickup being an era correct replacement at one point in time, but I never had photos to go off of. My best guess is neither of these pickups are actually original to this guitar, but should be era correct pieces. So right here we have a November 6th of 1979. That could be original, but our neck pickup does not have any type of a date stamp. We can also see somebody's added a little blob of solder right there just to keep this wire where it's supposed to go. But then when you look at the solder work right here, yeah, that's definitely not factory. But now follow our bridge pickup. That's certainly not looking factory either, and it looks like somebody might have had to replace this wire at some point in time. Now as far as what is it? It could be a mid-80s Tim Shaw PAF, or it would be a circa 1975 T-top, right as they transitioned into this new base plate from the patent water slide decal. And judging by the patina of it, I think that's what it is. But our pickup readings might tell us a little bit more. So bridge, 7.5, that's perfect. 7.43 in the neck, yeah, that's where it's supposed to be. Middle for fun, 3.74. But I would definitely believe the story that the guy never modified it and he bought it used. The neck pickup cover definitely has some additional wear to it. You can see where strings have kind of been resting against it and scratching. And you have some of that on the bridge pickup as well. They're definitely not mismatched necessarily, but there's a bit more wear on the neck. But what is very common on these is the KK downing effect. People will put pickup rings around here, and they would do that for two reasons. A, it adds some stability to the pickups because these have to sit up pretty high due to the whole neck angle situation. However, having a ring also allows you to raise them a little bit higher, but this is how they left the factory. And they definitely are pretty wobbly if you like to rest your hand against the bridge pickup or something. But looking back over here, none of this solder work actually looks correct to me, so I took a look at the pots. And it's not uncommon for like a year or two difference, but reading this, it dates to 1975, the 36th week, and so does that one. And this one's not readable at all. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody tried EMG active pickups, you know, they were big Metallica fans, and then somebody restored this with period correct parts for the most part at some point in time. So that's how I'll be advertising this one. But here's the cool thing about 70s Flying Vs. When everything else was maple necks, they're mahogany. I already told you that. But it's also one of the very few models to retain the ABR1 bridge. So when we talk about, oh, 70s equipped ABR1 bridge Les Pauls, they're so rare. Yes. However, the Flying Vs, that's not necessarily special for the particular model. For some reason, somebody swapped out the bridge on this one. This is the correct one. It was in the case, but they have a more modern one here that has a little bit better of a radius to it. This one's certainly still usable, not fully collapsed, but I think somebody swapped it because the retaining wire broke and no longer holds the saddles. And at the same time, they swapped out your posts as well as the thumb wheels, but the originals are in the case. As far as our tailpiece, it looks like the original one yet to me. Full weight. I almost decided not to clean this one because it really didn't look all that dirty, but then when I started to lightly clean it, I just realized how caked over it was. Like the guitar actually changed colors when I cleaned it. I captured this photo of it on the back where you can see that dark rich color versus the more lighter fill. It really did darken up the entire guitar. Now there's certain areas like right here, you gotta remember this is the era when they're using this kind of yellowish grain fill, and it doesn't always get applied properly, and sometimes things things will seep into the finish. Like, for example, right here, that could be sweat absorbing into the finish and deleting that. However, it's very common on the headstock. If you're wondering why this has a little bit of cow splotting, it's because somebody greased the tuners and whatever they use seeped into the finish. Usually that happens when it's an oil-based lubricant, and it just discolors it. It erases the yellow grain fill part. That happens a lot on 70s era guitars, especially SGs. Other than that, it's got light nicks and dings all over it, but I didn't really see any like huge gouges. So again, relative for its age and this particular model, that usually gets played out a lot, and it's very, very ultra common for headstock breaks on these. So much that almost everyone that shows up to the market has some sort of a repair, and people still pay very good money for them. But that was part of the reason I bought this one. It's a surviving example as far as the headstock goes. Another thing that's common is people will take the pickup covers off, but for me, the covered look on these is just so iconic. I love it. It's not uncommon for these pick guards to warp. You can see some warpage happening right there, especially right here on this particular one. But thankfully, we still have all the corners. Nothing has broken off. I found this cool. There's a shaded area underneath our ABR one. The reason for that, with the neck being so jacked up, this has to be put like all the way down, so sunlight was not able to fade the guard. It's also not uncommon for these pick guards to be replaced over the years because of that pickup ring situation, because if you restore it, you're left with some holes. The most collectible Flying V outside of the 60s originals is actually the 1972 Medallion Flying V. That's the one I want for my personal collection. Then we get our 3-piece mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. I polished up the frets. We do have some considerable fret wear up and down the neck. Might you want to level recrown or potentially refret? Maybe. However, they're actually still pretty tall for the era, so I think you would be good enough. But looking at these, I don't think they've ever been messed with. So I imagine you at least have one more level recrown, but again, I'm not a 100% qualified technician to tell you that. But they are the low, wide frets of the era. But it's cool how the side marker is kind of yellow on these. But here's another unique thing about these Flying Vs that makes them special. Skinny nut widths, 1.58 inches at the nut, then 2 inches at the 12th. But you've got a 0.8 first fret neck depth, that's 0.97 by the 12th. So very small in this area, but it feels good to my hands. But then it chunks up, kind of like a 65 Melody Maker that I always talk about. They're not overly wide necks, and they're just so comfortable to sit and play with. As far as the headstock, we already talked about this, the seepage of the lubrication of the tuners. The truss rod's in great shape. It seems to have been used a little bit, but not too much. I thought that was cool, a mahogany cap for a truss rod, and you can see the initials of the person who filed the frets at the factory. And the Gibson logo for these is on the truss rod cover itself. Always loved this look. Because outside of that, you don't have any Gibson branding, so be careful when buying these. Sometimes you get Electras or other knockoffs that somebody just put a Gibson truss rod cover on. But the 80s, they get these really rounded headstocks. It's an acquired taste. That's pretty much the biggest difference between the early 70s and the later ones. The headstock starts to change, and you switch into the other T-top stylings, among a few other smaller details, but they're all great. Knobs are also really cool on these. Most models lose the witch hat knobs around 75-ish, so these retain them for a little bit longer than that, and it's very common for people to swap these out. But again, it's part of the original look to these, in my opinion. Moving on to the back, here's the reason why I decided to go ahead and give this thing a deep clean. I was a little bit disappointed to find this. Somebody had a giant sticker on this at one point in time, and no, that's not something you can clean off like it's residue. It's actually reacted with the lacquer a little bit. It looks like a guy's head, like a suit. I don't know. It could be many a different things, but it's not uncommon for these things to have stickers on them. But this is what I'm talking about, sticker shadow. Sometimes it's like the bridge. It shields the clear coat, the rest of the guitar ages, that doesn't. You take it off, there it is. Other times it's, oh, it affected the nitro. If you put a sticker on a guitar thinking, oh yeah, I can just take it off, doesn't matter. Especially those old vintage shop stickers. Just know, you're still going to be able to see it. So that was one surprise here. Another surprise. Somebody decided to move the strap button location just a hair. So you got that exposed hole there. Otherwise, I would say this pretty large gouge in the back is the worst thing. I didn't notice any areas where the clear coat was necessarily destroyed, but you do have a lot of buckle worming marks as you shine the light around it right here towards the center. As far as how many pieces this body is, at first I was thinking it was one, but no, I do see a center seam line here now. Runs straight up the center there, but our neck heel looks good on this. You've got nicks, dings, and wormings on the edge. And here's the side that you will be seeing while you play. It's got kind of a nasty ding right there, and a few more where your arm rests, and on that corner too. Our neck's not in too bad a shape, but there is a few dings slash wormings in this area. You can kind of just barely feel them, like if you're trying to feel it, but this neck was kind of sticky when I first got it. It's back to that nice glossiness now. We'll take a good look around here. No breaks, cracks, or repairs. We'll blacklight it here in a second. But here's our shortly lived Gibson Norland branded Lucen Deluxe style tuners. But this one is a very early 1980, the 23rd day of the year. Kalamazoo built production number 82 for that particular day. Made in USA, stamped this way. I'll also tell you it's a KZ made guitar. But now under Blacklight, do we find anything spooky? Well, you can actually see there are some stand marks right there, and we get to see the complete outline of our shadow. To me, it looks like a bust, like the guy's wearing a suit. I suppose it could be like some sort of a fighter jet plane type thing, or a fancy arrow. But that ding did indeed break the finish right there. You got some cool mahogany wood grain. Otherwise, yeah, back's not bad. Look around the edge, you can see those dings again. Looking in between the legs, that would help you see that hole if you'd happened to have missed it before. And a quick look along here. But our neck is just glowing perfectly. Again, be very careful buying these old Flying V's. Due to the nature of just how cool and awesome they are, there's more broken ones than there are complete. It looks like this one's good. That's just some sort of a clear coat rub, likely from a stand like we're seeing along there. Rest of the headstock looks fine. And the top, you can see there's a small lacquer ding up here towards the top of the headstock. But even our pick guard has some nice glowing going on. That's always fun. So yes, I would say this 100% passes the Blacklight test. And yeah, that confirms it's a sweat absorption spot. Cool. It always feels weird telling people, yeah, your sweat can actually penetrate into the finish and get rid of the yellow grain fill. But no, that 100% proves it for me. Look at the weight. 6 pounds, 7 ounces. I mean, at just under 6.5 pounds, it's so nice and light on your back. If you have to have an older guitar, try one of these. And again, that's coming from a guy who absolutely adores Les Paul models. I don't care if you've tried other Flying V's in the past and you didn't like them. The 70s style just has some magic to it. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. I thought I'd do a quick little acoustic test. These project really well for being solid body guitars. That's why I also say they make great couch guitars. I've always had the theory that it's because the pickguard and the routings underneath it kind of act like an acoustic guitar having a hole within it. But you definitely feel the whole thing just vibrating. There's something to the way they constructed these. So there we go, Troglodytes. I hope you enjoyed this treat of documenting a 1980 Gibson Flying V in relatively good shape. It's been played, it's got some nicks and dings, but it's not as trashed as the bulk majority of these have been in the past. Now, if this one didn't have the sticker shadow and the move strap button, let's just say I would probably just end up keeping this one because I don't have a normal one in my collection. However, if you're looking for another episode to watch, you might enjoy this crazy one that I did end up keeping that has a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on for it. All right, Troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.